Walter, in a meth lab, looking at his reflection one last time. He falls to the ground, bleeding out with a calm expression on his face. That was how the show ended. But before the name Heisenberg was used to describe a drug lord with no mercy, Walter Hartwell White was a mild-mannered chemistry teacher in Albuquerque. His biggest problem was getting disinterested teenagers excited about chemistry. So how the hell did this guy become a ruthless meth kingpin who manipulated, murdered, and destroyed almost everything and everyone he touched? When we meet Walter White in the pilot episode, he's standing in front of a classroom scribbling chemical equations on a whiteboard. But what we don't know yet is that Walter was an unfulfilled potential. This underpaid, overworked teacher is actually a scientist who once co-authored research worthy of a Nobel Prize. Walter lives in a modest home in Albuquerque with his pregnant wife Skylar and teenage son Walt Jr., who has cerebral palsy. He scrubs car tires at a local car wash after school to make ends meet, a fact he fails to hide from his students. And when Skylar throws him a surprise birthday party, it turns into another subtle ego hit. His brother-in-law, Hank, who's a DEA agent full of bravado, becomes the center of attention. Hank brags about drug busts and shows off a gun. Everyone laughs at his jokes while Walt stays quiet. You can see how small Walter feels in his own house. But what really stings is what we learn about his past. This isn't just some underachieving science teacher. Walter once helped found Gray Matter Technologies, a company that went on to be worth billions. But for reasons the show slowly reveals, he left early and sold his shares for a paltry $5,000. Now, every time he hears about the company or its founders, Elliot and Gretchen Schwartz, it's like a fresh slap in the face. They represent the life he could have had, and in his mind, should have had. All this sets the stage for everything Walter will do. This tells us that he's interested in money, but he's desperate for meaning, recognition, and power. His world has belittled him for so long, students, family, former partners, that when the cancer diagnosis hits, it triggers something so deep no one knew was in him, not even Walter himself. Walter White's darkness doesn't begin in a meth lab. It begins in a classroom where no one listens, at a party where no one sees him, and in a life that constantly reminds him he's failed. The cancer didn't create Heisenberg, it just gave him permission to show himself. Knowing that he's going to die, Walter is now focused on one thing: making money to support his family after he's gone. So he teams up with Jesse, and they start cooking his first batch of meth in the desert, then ends up killing two dealers, Emilio and Crazy 8, in self-defense. But it's what happens after that really matters. Emilio's death was chaotic. It was a reaction to immediate danger. But Crazy 8 survives, and Walter locks him in Jesse's basement, chained to a pole with a bike lock around his neck. For days. Walter brings him food and talks to him, tries to convince himself there's still a way out, one that doesn't involve blood. He writes a pros and cons list to killing Crazy 8. He wants to believe he's still the good man, a teacher doing a bad thing for the right reasons. But then he sees that Crazy 8 has hidden a broken plate as a weapon, and that's when Walter makes up his mind. He walks down the stairs and strangles Crazy 8 with the lock. Yes, he does it with tears in his eyes. Yes, he apologizes to Crazy 8's corpse. And yes, he feels enough remorse that he breaks his deal with Jesse. No more meth. But even with all that, we know what this moment really is. It's the moment Walter White proves he can kill when it's necessary. Walter starts cooking again after Gretchen and Elliot offer to pay for his cancer treatment. He sees their help not as kindness, but as charity. And Walter White doesn't accept charity, so he doubles down. He sets a goal: $737,000. According to his calculations, that's enough to cover the essentials for his family over the next 20 years. Mortgage paid, college funds secured, Skylar and the kids live comfortably. He hits that number, and guess what? He doesn't stop. He doesn't even slow down. Because somewhere along the way, the goalpost keeps moving for one reason or another. When Gus Fring offers him a clean way out, a pristine lab, a six-figure salary, protection from the streets, Walter still finds reasons to stay in the game. At this point, it's no longer about money. It's about being the best, the smartest, the one in control. That shift is subtle at first, but unmistakable. You see it when he lectures Jesse about purity percentages, when he walks into Tuco Salamanca's den with fulminated mercury, willing to blow them all up just to make a point. Walter isn't chasing survival anymore. He's chasing power. And to Walter, power tastes better than any dollar ever could. When Skylar starts asking questions, he gaslights her. When Jesse wants out, he manipulates him back in. And when Jane is dying, Walter watches. He could save her, he doesn't, because Jesse was leaving him for her. And Walter saw Jesse as his own property to mold and to control. Walter has shifted from desperate to dominant. He no longer tries to play the good man, the soft-spoken teacher. He starts saying the quiet part out loud, like when Skylar begs him to go to the police, tells him he's not built for this world. And he responds, cold and controlled. "I am not in danger, Skylar. I am the danger." That's not just a quote, it's a confession. Walter White isn't slipping, he's stepping into who he's always wanted to be. Heisenberg isn't just a name, it's not just a fake identity or a hat, it's the destiny Walt chose for himself. At first, Heisenberg is a mask, a persona Walt puts on when he needs to intimidate, negotiate, or threaten. But over time, that mask becomes his true face. This chapter of Walter's journey, spanning the end of Season 3 and into Season 4, marks the full birth of Heisenberg. Not the desperate husband, not the misguided father, but the cold, calculating force of domination that lies beneath. We already saw signs of this shift when Walter lets Jane die. Jane is a threat to the operation, and to Walter's control over Jesse. Letting her die is a strategic decision. That's a man making calculations, and those calculations only get colder. He even poisons a child to win Jesse's loyalty back. Gus being a criminal genius, he knows Walter's truth, an unpredictable, egotistical, and dangerous man hungry for power. And since Jesse learned Walter's cooking process, Gus believes that Walter is no longer needed. And Walter knows that Gus wants to get rid of him, so he plots a plan. Walter's goal, kill Gus Fring, but he can't do it alone. He needs Jesse. But at that point, Jesse is loyal to Gus and refuses to help Walter. So, Walt literally poisons Brock, the son of Jesse's girlfriend Andrea, to create a situation where Jesse believes Gus tried to kill Brock. Jesse's loyalty snaps. He teams up with Walt again, and together, they orchestrate Gus Fring's assassination. It's a horrific act, and it works. Because Heisenberg isn't driven by conscience, he's driven by the outcome. And if the outcome justifies the action, no tactic is off limits, not even endangering a child. That's Heisenberg, not sweet Mr. White. As Walt himself later admits, "I did it for me. I liked it. I was good at it." That leads us to the most elaborate move on Heisenberg's chessboard, the orchestration of Gus Fring's death. Gus is everything Walter pretends to be, calm, polished, ruthless, in control. He runs a global drug empire without ever breaking a sweat. And Walt knows, if he doesn't destroy Gus, Gus will destroy him. But unlike earlier seasons, Walter no longer tries to outmuscle his enemies. He outmaneuvers them. He recruits Hector Salamanca, a broken, near-dead cartel relic who can barely move or speak. Walt weaponizes Hector's hatred for Gus and rigs a bomb to his wheelchair. When Gus walks in to gloat one last time. Source: Gus walks out, half his face gone, adjusting his tie, and collapses. And this is the clearest evidence yet of who Walt has become. He is no longer reacting to threats. He's eliminating rivals. He kills the king and takes the throne. And with that, the transformation is complete. But here's the twist. Even as Heisenberg takes over, Walter keeps insisting that he's doing it for his family, that he's still the man from the pilot episode, just trying to leave behind a little money. But his actions tell another story, because when Skylar asks what happened to Gus, Walter doesn't say, "He's gone." He says, "I won." That line is the clearest window into his mind. It's all about winning the game to him. Walter White built an empire brick by brick, manipulation by manipulation. But what's built on lies, fear, and control never holds. As the empire grows, the people around him begin to break. And that's how it ended up being for everyone who loved Walter. Hank is crushed by the truth. When Hank discovers and finally confronts him, Walt's response isn't remorse. He doesn't take responsibility either. Instead, he crafts a calculated lie. Walter gives Hank a confession tape that pins everything on Hank, says that Hank was building a meth empire and forced Walter to be his cook. A twisted story built so carefully to destroy Hank's life and protect his own. Mike Ehrmantraut is another casualty of Walt's spiral. Mike is murdered not out of necessity, but ego. One insult, and Walt pulls the trigger. Mike tells him everything would have been fine if Walt had just stayed in his place. And Walt shoots him. Walter is now a man who kills because he can't stand being criticized. Back home, Skylar is left to pick up the shattered pieces. The empire Walt built didn't leave her with security. It left her with ashes. The car wash is under suspicion. The money is untouchable. And her name is ruined. She's stuck working low-wage jobs, hounded by the IRS. Walt promised he did it all for his family. But when it's over, his family has nothing. Worse than nothing. Flynn is horrified by what his father became. Holly will grow up with a last name people whisper about. The grief that hangs over the family isn't just about loss. It's about betrayal. The children lost their uncle and their father in the same breath, and to them, one killed the other. And then, Jesse. Walter hands Jesse over to the neo-Nazis as a punishment for disobeying him. Imprisoned in a cage by neo-Nazis, forced to cook meth like a slave. The same Jesse who once called Walt Mr. White with a hint of admiration. Jesse who just wanted out. Jesse who begged for peace. Walt tells Jesse he let Jane die. He says it with venom. "I watched her die," he says. "I could have saved her, but I didn't." That's psychological torture. Walter destroyed everyone's lives, even his own. Walter White, by the end, returns to Albuquerque to redeem himself. He visits Skylar one last time. She's exhausted, not just emotionally, but physically depleted from the weight of his destruction. He gives her the GPS coordinates to Hank and Gomez's bodies and offers what might be the only honest statement he's ever made. For 5 seasons, Walter White swore he was doing it for his family. That became his mantra, his justification, his moral shield. This moment of self-awareness doesn't redeem him. It just strips away the last excuse. Walt doesn't ask for forgiveness. It's just a quiet, clear-eyed admission that the monster was always there, and he let it out because it felt good. For the last time, he says goodbye to Holly and watches Flynn from a distance, then heads to Gretchen and Elliot's house, the couple who he believes stole his life. He threatens them into funneling his drug money to Flynn under the guise of a trust fund. And the last destination was the neo-Nazi compound. Walter sees Jesse in chains, so Walt tackles him to the ground, just as the remote-activated turret opens fire, mowing down the entire gang. And Walt gets caught in the crossfire of his own trap, mortally wounded. Jesse walks away. He leaves Walt behind. Alone and bleeding, Walt stumbles through the compound and finds his way into the meth lab. He walks among the equipment, touching the tanks and tubes like they're old friends. He collapses just as the police arrive. Were Walter's final moves acts of redemption, or just the last performance of a man who couldn't die without a win? In my opinion, Walter White didn't die a hero, nor a martyr. He died a man who finally looked in the mirror and liked what he saw. But what do you think? Let us know in the comments. And if you found this deep dive compelling, give the video a like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss what's next.